千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. I want to get into the next line of the Tao Te Ching. This is something that I talked about previously, but I realize that in every meeting that we have, every time someone looks at a recording on YouTube, there is a possibility that they're only encountering these talks for the first time. And therefore, it bears repeating, and it may be a good idea for us to speak on a topic specifically, and that way, later on, we can extract it as a talking point that is something short and digestible, like 10-15 minutes. So I'm talking about what you see in this slide, 圣人, which is translated as the sage, or plural, the sages. So even though this is something that I spoke of, I don't think I've done it in quite this level of complete details. So let me go to the breakdown of the two characters. 圣人 is composed of two characters. 圣, like 神圣, is that which is sacred or divine. 人, the second character, that is simply the character for person or plural, persons or people. Now, we have translated this as sage, singular, or sages, plural. Let's talk about the meaning from the perspective of the two characters broken out like this. A divine person, what is a divine person? Well, it's actually not a straightforward joining of the two characters to form the meaning of this particular term. The actual meaning is a person with divine virtue and wisdom, or you can think of it as virtue and wisdom that approach the divine. And I want to be very careful about the word divine here, because the first inclination that we have is to connect the divine with religious traditions. But here, divine can be religious or non-religious. I realize that this is potentially confusing, so I want to explain why divine can be religious or non-religious, and that way you appreciate the utilization in 圣人, especially as it applies in Chinese history. So think about your life. Think about experiences that you have had. There are times when we've all had peak experiences, when we experience something that is so incredible, something that is so beautiful, it seems to transcend this material world. Do you know the feeling that I'm talking about? Well, one most common example would be music. So think about witnessing, taking in, experiencing a performance of such magnitude that it becomes unforgettable, an unforgettable experience. Now, music is a very wide spectrum, so this can be anything in the world of music. Perhaps it is a world-class symphony putting on a phenomenal performance. It may be an incredibly talented and skillful musician. And by musician, that covers a lot of ground too. Maybe a pianist, maybe a violinist, maybe a vocalist, maybe some other instrument. So this is what I mean when I said that we've all had that experience, because we all know music can be good, great, or simply out of this world. When you have that experience, that is the context of divine that I'm referencing. It is also possible to have that same feeling of awe to when you look at art, an incredible piece of art, whether it's a painting, sculpture, a drawing, whatever, it's possible to have that experience. Then it is also possible, for instance, reading great literature, perhaps poetry, you can get that same sense of awe. A religious person, especially someone in the West, living in the Judeo-Christian tradition, may associate that sense of awe, that sense of the divine, with God. Someone from a different religious background, maybe a religious person from an Eastern tradition, may associate it with the Buddha or Dharma. But at the same time, a non-religious person can see it, can see that accomplishment, that peak experience as the peak of human achievement, rather than in conjunction with religious figures or teachings. And the non-religious person can express admiration from a humanist perspective. So that is why the term divine can be religious or non-religious. And when you see, when you experience and go back to that feeling of awe that we have all experienced in great works of art, great works of music, you can see exactly what that is. And coming back to this slide, sometimes 圣人 is translated as holy man. You can see now that this is not a great translation because holy is much more of a religious context. You wouldn't just want to arbitrarily translate it as a divine person. What is that? That tends to be associated with religious traditions as well. And if you were to go too close to the religious side of it, you miss out on the secular or the non-religious aspect of the term. Furthermore, I hope you can see why the term should not be translated as man, translate person as man, because there is absolutely nothing to prevent a woman to be just as wise or wiser than a man. So the divine person, person itself, is a gender neutral term, and that's the context of 人. 人 by itself is not a man. 男人 will be a man. And 男人 literally means a male person. 女人, female person, is a woman. 人 by itself is just person, gender neutral. Sometimes this point can be forgotten because ancient Chinese history has been mostly male dominated. But the bottom line is that the wise person, the wisest person, can be either male or female. The language itself applies both ways. So I want to make sure everyone understands that. And luckily, sage is a gender neutral term. One can have a male or female sage. So continue on. There's a bunch of sages from ancient Chinese history that are widely regarded as having that status, that respect to be sages, people whose virtue or wisdom were seen as approaching the divine. So in learning the Tao Te Ching, we definitely see Lao Tzu as a person fitting that description. Lao Tzu did not see himself as a sage. When he talked about sages, he was referencing the ancient sages who were ancient to him, the people who came and went before his time. And I've got different romanization here in this line. Laozi is the correct pronunciation, and it's written in a couple of different ways in accordance with the romanization system. The one on the right, that's the pinyin system. That is a system that we expect will become the standard going forward. And then we can't talk about Laozi without Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is the other sage that uses stories to explain great truths in the Tao. So he was certainly seen as a sage. Then Kongzi, Confucius, and you see the pinyin is closer to the Kongzi, the way it actually sounds in Chinese, in Mandarin. And then Mengzi. So Kongzi, Mengzi, these two are from the Confucian tradition. And it is it's easily forgotten that they too, during their time, they consider themselves to be students of the Tao. They were all studying the Tao just like Laozi, Zhuangzi. All of these, from roughly the same period of time in history, these were all sages, and they were all Tao sages, at least by the standard that we're talking about. They were all studying the Tao. In later days, people would divide up the first two, Laozi and Zhuangzi, and say that they belong to the Tao tradition, and then Kongzi, Mengzi, the latter two, as belonging to the Confucian tradition. But back in those days, it was all one and the same. It was simply the Tao. So just a little more on that. Just a few more notes on this particular term, shen, sacred or divine. The first character, it has nothing to do with evolution. There's no meaning in shen that is even close to the concept of evolution. So shen ren, if you were to go sacred person, divine person, well, at least you are translating literally. But if you translate it as evolved individual, you're really making up this whole idea of spiritual evolution as being the sacred or divine thing. Well, the term shen does not imply that. And this is why the term should never be translated as evolved individual. And that's being used in some places, and I think you can see for yourself why it would not be optimal. Less optimal, but still accurate, would be the wise ones, and you could also say the virtuous ones. And this is because shen, the divine or sacred attribute of the person, comes from the virtue or wisdom approaching the divine level of being virtuous or being wise. So this is not as optimal, but it's still accurate because of that. Yet another way to translate the term is to use the term master. It would be less than ideal for a bunch of reasons. First of all, when you say master, it's got a bunch of different connotations. There's a potential for confusion, like master of what? So in the Tao context, people will automatically assume perhaps a Tao master. So that would be okay. It would fit, but it's less than ideal because there are times when Tao master may just be a title. So it's more about the authority than wisdom. And there are different kinds of masters. There's the Zen master, there's the Kung Fu master. Those have different terms. A Zen master will be 禅师, so it's a specific term for that, which is different from 圣人. A Kung Fu master, 师傅, will be a specific term just for that. And again, a Kung Fu master would not be 圣人. A Zen master would not be 圣人. And there are significant towering Zen masters throughout history that later on were accorded the title of 圣人, but typically the term is not applied to just any of the many Zen masters throughout history, nor modern day Zen masters. So at the end of this discussion, we come back to sage. There's still no better word to fit 圣人 in the English language. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.